The NFL season is just a couple months away, and today I'm going to be predicting everything that's going to happen. I'll be predicting every team's record, playoff seeding, the entire playoffs, the Super Bowl champion, and every NFL Honors Award winner. If you end up enjoying this video, please drop a like, and if you're new, then subscribe. It's completely free and helps out a ton. That being said, let's get started. We'll start with the NFC North and the Chicago Bears. It's a new era in Chicago. Justin Fields is out, Caleb Williams is in, and I think he was a true blue chip prospect. He has all the tools and potential to be a great quarterback in this league. He also has a great supporting cast around him with DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, and rookie Rome Odunze. The defense should also be pretty solid, led by Montez Sweat and Jalen Johnson. However, Caleb Williams is still a rookie and has a lot of growing to do. I have the Bears going 7-10, which is a little lower than most, but I can't give a team with a rookie quarterback too high of expectations. I think there will be some bright spots throughout the season, but they will also go through some rough patches. Overall, this season is just to see what the Bears have in Caleb Williams, and there's no need for them to try and contend this year, but the future of the Chicago Bears is bright. Moving on to the Lions, who finally have expectations for the first time in who knows how long. This team is a bona fide Super Bowl contender, and that shows with my record prediction of 12-5 for them. Jared Goff is a top 15 QB, Jahmyr Gibbs is a rising superstar, and Amon-Ra St. Brown is at minimum a top 7 receiver. Ben Johnson is an outstanding offensive coordinator, and the Lions defense fixed their only big flaw, the secondary, by drafting Terrion Arnold and Ernest Rakestraw Jr. They also brought in Carlton Davis, which I think is a really underrated signing. This team is ready to contend now, and that's exactly what they're going to do. For the Packers, last season was all about finding out if Jordan Love was the guy, and it's safe to say that he did just that. They also upgraded and got younger at running back, bringing in Josh Jacobs, who just 2 years ago led the league in rushing yards. Their receiving core is super young and talented as well, headlined by Romeo Doubs and Jaden Reed. Getting rid of Joe Barry should help this defense actually perform like their roster talent suggests they should. I have them finishing 10-7 this season. While lacking superstar talent, this team doesn't have many holes on their roster. I think this is an above-average squad that will have an above-average season. Similar to the Bears, the Vikings also drafted a quarterback in the first round, selecting J.J. McCarthy 10th overall. But unlike Williams, McCarthy won't have to start week 1, which will be very beneficial for him. The Vikings will likely start free agent Sam Darnold at QB, who I think isn't as bad as everyone else thinks he is. He finally has a proper supporting cast around him, with a top 5 receiving core in Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, and TJ Hawkinson, as well as a top 3 tackle duo in Christian Darrisaw and Brian O'Neill. Aaron Jones is still a good running back, even at the age of 29. His defense will be very solid as well. I think Brian Flores is an elite defensive mind, and between drafting Dallas Turner and signing players like Jonathan Goddard and Blake Cashman, this unit as a whole will be very effective. It isn't all great though. There are some major questions with the interior offensive and defensive lines, so stopping the run and getting interior pressure may be an issue. The Vikings also have a very tough schedule, and I have them going 9-8. This team has a lot of young players at key positions, but it's going to take time for everyone to reach their ceiling. But the future for the Vikings is very bright. So here are my projected NFC North Standings. The Lions take the division for the second year in a row, going 12-5, with the Packers not too far behind at 10-7. The Vikings come up just short of second place by 1 game, and the Bears fall to 4th place in what is a very competitive division. Moving on to the NFC West, we'll start with the defending NFC champions, the 49ers. This team didn't lose many pieces in free agency, with their most notable loss being Eric Armstead. Their biggest loss didn't actually come in free agency, but before then in the Super Bowl, where Dre Greenlaw tore his Achilles, and it's likely he won't be able to return by week 1. Devondre Campbell is a solid replacement, but he is nowhere near Greenlaw's ability. Despite Brandon Ayuk's cryptic messages and weird conversations with other players, I don't think the 49ers have any intention of trading him. This is more or less the same team as last year, and I see them having a very similar season to last year, going 13-4. Like all teams, they will slip up a few times and have a few surprising losses, but overall, they will cruise through the NFC West and NFC in general yet again. On to the Rams, who came within a point of moving on to the divisional round of the playoffs last season. This year, they will be looking to make it back to the playoffs, but they won't have Aaron Donald helping them out this time. However, they have rising stars at many positions. Puka Nacua is the first name that comes to mind, coming out of nowhere last season to break the rookie receiving yards and receptions record. Kyron Williams broke out as well, finishing 3rd in rushing yards despite only playing 12 games. Kobe Turner and Byron Young are promising players as well, and of course, veterans Matt Stafford and Cooper Kupp are still some of the better players at their positions. I have this team going 11-6 this upcoming season, winning some big games including getting revenge on the Lions in week 1 and beating the 49ers in week 15. I find no reason that this Rams team can't have a good season. Cardinals are still in a rebuilding phase, and though they have Kyler Murray as their quarterback, they still have holes everywhere else on this roster, specifically interior defensive line, cornerback, and interior offensive line. I loved Marvin Harrison Jr. as a prospect, and I think Paris Johnson is a very solid tackle, but those are really the only bright spots on this offense outside of Kyler Murray, and that's why I have them finishing just 4-13. I think they will keep a lot of games close, but when it really matters, I think this defense is either going to fold or Kyler won't be able to orchestrate a game-winning drive. This Cardinals team does have some promising players, but they aren't ready to compete with most other teams just yet. I'm just going to put it out there. I think the Seattle Seahawks are one of the most overrated teams in the NFL right now. Geno Smith is the definition of a mediocre quarterback. This offensive line is not good. They do have a great receiving core, but that isn't going to matter if Geno doesn't have any time to throw. This defense outside of a few players is awful as well. I like Byron Murphy, and Devin Witherspoon is a great corner, but that's about it. Tariq Woolen will get you some interceptions, but he can't defend the run to save his life. Speaking of run defense, the Seahawks don't really have anyone. Byron Murphy can stop the run, but he's more of a pass rusher than a run defender. Leonard Williams is good, but not great, and the loss of Bobby Wagner really drags down this linebacker core. Taking all this into account, I have the Seahawks finishing at just 5-12. I'm sorry to say it, but this team is just not good, and I can't really understand how some people have the Seahawks finishing with 9 wins. But on the bright side, this puts the Seahawks in a good position to draft a QB next year. Looking at my projected NFC West predictions, I don't think this is going to be super controversial. 49ers and Rams are far and away the two best teams in this division, with the 49ers taking the division at 13-4 and the Rams coming in second at 11-5. The Seahawks come in third at 5-12 and the Cardinals bottom it out at 4-13. It may be boring to put the 49ers and Rams on top again, but that's just how I think it's going to go. Moving on to the NFC East, and we'll begin with the New York Giants. This is overall a solid team that's drastically held back by two things: quarterback and receivers. Daniel Jones is not a franchise quarterback, and outside of Malik Neighbors, the receiver room is very mediocre. Downgrading from Saquon Barkley to Devin Singletary doesn't help either, and we still don't know what's going on with Evan Neal. The defensive line is very good, and I love Brian Daboll as a head coach, but I still only see this team winning 6 games. The schedule is not favorable either, being tied for the 6th hardest in the league, and overall this is going to be another disappointing season for the Giants. They can get out of Daniel Jones' contract after this season though, so at least there's that. Eagles had an extremely disappointing second half of the season last year, and Jalen Hurts regressed significantly in the passing department from 2022 to 2023, throwing just 1 more touchdown and over double the interceptions. The defense was also very bad last year, specifically the secondary's tackling. However, I think that play calling played a large factor in the second half collapse, and bringing in Kellen Moore and Vic Fangio should help out quite a bit. Adding Quinion Mitchell and Cooper DeJean should help as well. I also think Jalen Hurts will bounce back this year. That, combined with a relatively easy schedule, gives them 13 wins in my predictions, with their only losses coming to relatively good to great teams on the road. I really think the play calling hindered this team last year, and this year we'll get to see their true potential. It's a new era in Washington. They decided to fire Ron Rivera and hire Dan Quinn, but I'm not sure if this was the right move. Hiring a defensive-minded head coach usually puts a cap on the ceiling of a team. I mean, we just saw this with their last coach, Ron Rivera. I worry that in a few years, the Commanders are going to look back on this hire and wish they got someone else a head coach. Also, hiring an offensive-minded head coach is usually better for a rookie quarterback. Speaking of rookie quarterbacks, they drafted Jadon Daniels 2nd overall. He's an elite runner already, but he lacks a little as a passer. He doesn't attack the middle of the field very often, which can often lead to missing open digs or crossing routes. However, his deep ball is great and his upside is very high, but as with most teams with rookie quarterbacks drafted high, I don't think the Commanders are going to do very well this year. I have them at just 2 wins, which seems low, and it is, but when looking at the rest of this roster, it makes a lot more sense. Their edge group might be the worst in the league, and the secondary isn't much better. The offensive line outside of Sam Cosmi isn't great as well. However, a 2-win season isn't always bad. They'll be able to get a high draft pick next year, and it's not like they have any expectations this year anyway. Be patient, Commanders fans. Your time will eventually come. It seems as if the Cowboys do the same thing every year. Be great in the regular season and then choke in the playoffs. And unfortunately for them, Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb are going to be looking for new contracts, with Micah Parsons not far behind, so they might not be able to keep their roster together for long. This year though, they do have a talented team, and I have them finishing 10-7. As usual, they will beat bad teams and lose more often than not to playoff contenders. It's just the Cowboy way. Looking at the NFC East, I have the Eagles coming in first at 13-4, with the Cowboys trailing behind at 10-7, and then the Giants and Commanders hanging out at the bottom. It shouldn't be too controversial. The Cowboys and Eagles are far better teams than the Commanders and Giants. Final division in the NFC, and we'll start with the Saints. I truly don't know what the Saints' plan is. They seem like they're trying to contend, yet they're never able to make any big free agent signings because of their constant cap issues. Signing Derek Carr to his massive contract didn't help, and now they're stuck in mediocrity until they can get out of Carr's contract. This offensive line is also not good, which is very bad for a QB like Carr, who has almost no semblance of pocket presence. I think Trevor Penning continue to be a starter is just not good, because it isn't looking like Ryan Ramczyk will be able to play. The defensive line isn't very good either, and Cam Jordan's age is catching up to him. At least Mario Davis is still playing at an elite level at 35, but this team is simply not ready to contend with others in the NFC, or even in their own division, and I have them finishing with only 6 wins on the season. None of their wins are against good teams either. It wouldn't surprise me if Dennis Allen is fired at the end of the season, and the Saints just tear everything down and finally try to get out of cap hell. The Saints, can we please see Spencer Rattler at least once this year, because at least he'll make this team watchable. Panthers can't do much worse than they did last season, and they knew it. That's why they spent $150 million on 2 new guards, to make sure Bryce Young has more than 35 nanoseconds to throw the ball. They do need Young to bounce back after a rough rookie season though. Deontay Johnson and Xavier Legette should help as well. And hey, Dave Canales revived Baker Mayfield, so maybe he can do the same to Young. But in order to help the offense, Carolina basically wiped away their defense. They have no superstars anywhere except for Derrick Brown. This team has a future, but we're talking about the present. And presently, I present the Panthers with 5 presents. But at least it's a step up from last season, and I do think Bryce Young will bounce back. The Falcons gave Kirk Cousins $180 million, only to draft Michael Penix 8th overall, instead of bolstering their very bad defensive line. But this team is still good, especially on offense. Bijan Robinson is a generational running back that would have gotten over 2,000 yards if Arthur Smith actually knew how to use his starters. And Kyle Pitts and Drake London should finally have their breakout seasons. But again, that defense worries me. More specifically, the defensive line. The secondary is really solid, with AJ Terrell and the best safety in the league, Jesse Bates. We'll see what Raheem Morris can do with this defense, but he will have his work cut out for him. I think the Falcons will pull away with 10 wins. They'll take their losses to the good teams like the Chiefs and Eagles, but I think they can hang with most of the other teams in the league. This might have been more like 11 wins if they drafted Dallas Turner or Latu, but you do you, Terry. Baker Mayfield is back, and the Bucs are a solid team. They didn't do a ton in free agency, but they maintain all their key guys and are a very similar team heading into the season. However, they no longer have Dave Canales, who played a big part in Baker's revival. I also don't love Todd Bowles as a head coach. He's a good defensive mind, but as a coach who can rally his guys after a loss, I'm not so sure. He was on the hot seat until last season. Also, the Bucs don't get the pleasure of playing Desmond Ridder 2 times a year. I have the Bucs going 9-8 this season, same as last year. I think they'll keep a lot of games close, but won't always be able to finish them out. But they will be a solid team. Unfortunately for the Bucs, going 9-8 isn't enough to win the division this year, as an improved Falcons team takes it from them by 1 game. Carolina once again finishes last, but at least they have the future, unlike the Saints. Sorry, Saints fans, but it's the truth. I still want to see Spencer Rattler though. So here are my projected NFC standings. The 49ers take the 1 seed over the Eagles via the strength of victories tiebreaker, meaning the Eagles fall to the 2 seed. The Lions sit comfortably at the 3 seed, and the Falcons gain the 4 seed after winning what is yet again the worst division in the NFC. As for the wildcard teams, the Rams take the 5 seed after an impressive season, and the Cowboys and Packers take the 6 and 7 seeds respectively, with the Cowboys getting the nod due to the conference record tiebreaker. This means that unlike last year, no 9-8 teams make the playoffs in the NFC, as the Vikings and Bucks barely miss out. The Vikings gain the 8 seed over the Bucks though, due to the common games record tiebreaker. Underneath the Bucks, the Bears sit at the 10 seed, and the Giants take the 11 seed over the Saints due to the head-to-head tiebreaker, as the Giants beat the Saints in week 14. The 13 seed Panthers come out on top over the 14 seed Seahawks due to the strength of victories tiebreaker. The Cardinals is second to last at the 15 seed, and the Commanders bottom out the NFC at the 16 seed. Those are my NFC standings predictions. Let's move on to the AFC. Moving on to my AFC predictions, we'll start in the AFC North with the Cleveland Browns. The Browns have a loaded roster that's held back by Mr. Massage. Watson is very polarizing. On one hand, he's 8-4 as the Browns starter, and on the other hand, he's played so incredibly awful and has made some truly head-scratching reads at times, and other times just blatantly missing throws. He hasn't played a full season since 2020, so who honestly knows what we're going to get from this dude. The rest of the roster is absolutely loaded with talent though, and I think it's enough to get the Browns 12 wins this season, despite having a very difficult schedule. The defense should be near the top of the league again, and I think Nick Chubb will play like a top 7-8 running back even after the injury. But Watson does limit the potential of this team. Still don't know what the Browns were smoking when they gave him that contract. Moving on to the team that's been stuck in mediocrity since 2018. Russell Wilson is objectively washed, and Fields isn't any better. The weapons outside of George Pickens and Pat Freiermuth just don't exist. As usual though, this defense is insane. TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith might just be the best edge duo in the league, and Cam Hayward still exists, but I worry that the offense is going to hold them back from being a true top team this year. However, Mike Tomlin will never have a losing season, no matter how much he has to sacrifice to the football gods to get it, and I have the Steelers going 9-8 for what feels like the 25th time in 20 years. They're going to beat the bad teams, lose to good teams, somehow beat the Ravens on the road because Steelers, and overall just be an average team. At least they aren't the ones paying Russ. The Ravens are once again an absolutely stacked team. Like it or not, Lamar's a 2-time MVP. This defense is very good. And oh yeah, they brought in Derrick freaking Henry. Lamar, Henry, Reed options is all the rest of this division is going to see in their sleep. I have the Ravens with 13 wins, and this shouldn't really be a debate. They are objectively one of the best teams in the NFL and really only got better. Not a lot else to say about them. The Bengals going 9-8 last year with Jake Browning was pretty impressive, and if Joe Burrow can play a full season, this team will rise back to Super Bowl contention. They have a top receiving duo, Mike Gesicki's a big upgraded tight end, and the defense should be pretty good. Losing DJ Reader does hurt, but it shouldn't affect them too much, and I think Trey Hendrickson is super underrated. Their schedule also is the easiest in the division, and I have them going 13-4. And yes, I have them starting the season with 6 wins, including beating the Ravens and Chiefs. I think this is the year that Joe Burrow finally breaks his annual routine of being the absolute worst quarterback in the NFL history for weeks 1 through 4. He's still a top 3 quarterback, and if he can stay healthy, this team will be a scary one come playoff time. The AFC North might just be the best division in the NFL, and I have all 4 teams finishing above 500. The Ravens take the division over the Bengals due to the division record tiebreaker, with the Browns not far behind at 11-6, and the Steelers bringing up the rear at 9-8. Only in this division does a 9-8 team finish last. On to the AFC West, where we'll begin with the defending Super Bowl champion Kansas City Swifties. Unfortunately for 95% of NFL fans, the Chiefs fixed their only real problem last year, the receiving core. They basically decided they want to throw a log every play again, so they casually brought in 2 of the fastest receivers in the NFL, in Hollywood Brown and Xavier Worthy. With Rashee Rice and Travis Kelce being great underneath targets, defenses will have nightmares trying to cover everybody. Though who knows what's going on with Rice, or if he's going to be suspended for a stupid car incident. The defense is going to be great again under Steve Spagnuolo, even with the loss of L'Jarius Sneed. Also, Andy Reid is really good at coaching. There isn't any reason for a healthy Chiefs team to not have a fantastic season, and I have that happening here. I predict they'll go 14-3 this season. They're going to enact their usual tradition of losing to one team every year that they really shouldn't. In this case, it's the Raiders in week 13, but overall, this team is once again going to be a dangerous one. I think the Chargers are doing whatever they can to make sure Justin Herbert never gets the recognition he deserves. I like the hiring of Jim Harbaugh, but that's it. This team is Justin Herbert and nobody else. The receiving core is awful, Gus Edwards is mediocre at best, and the Chargers' run defense is actually shit. The only guys who can consistently stop the run are Khalil Mack, an edge rusher, and Derwin James, who's a literal safety. The tackle duo of Rashawn Slater and Joe Alt is good, but what really leaves me confused is the hiring of Greg Roman. This dude is notorious for running the absolute piss out of the ball, which is why it's weird that they hired him considering they don't have a good running back and Justin Herbert cannot do the things Lamar Jackson can on the ground. All things considered, I think the Jim Harbaugh era doesn't start out great, with the Chargers only getting 6 wins, and I think that Greg Roman will be fired at the end of the season. Justin Herbert will keep games close, but his defense will sell at the wrong times, and the receiving core won't help Herbert out much either. At least they don't have Brandon Staley. The Raiders are very interesting to me, because it seems like they really want Aiden O'Connell to be good. I get that they weren't in a position to draft a QB in last year's draft, but at the same time, this roster is too good to finish bottom of the league. I did really love the Gardner Minshew signing, because if Aiden doesn't work out, Gardner Minshew is a very capable bridge quarterback. However, this also could be a problem if the Raiders are looking to draft a quarterback next year, because Minshew might be too good to get them only 3 wins. But hey, maybe O'Connell has a really good season. The rest of this team is very solid. Max Crosby is a very scary human, and Devontae Adams is still a top wideout. The duo of Brock Bowers and Michael Mayer is going to be very hard to stop as well, and I think the lack of effort to get a true wide receiver 3 tells me that the Raiders are going to live in 12 personnel. Bringing in Christian Wilkins just makes this defensive line that much better, and Antonio Pierce is a really good head coach that the players really seem to like. However, there are still many concerns. Going from Josh Jacobs to Zamir White is an obvious downgrade, and the secondary is not great. Also, having Gardner Minshew and Aiden O'Connell does put a massive cap on the ceiling of this team. Combine all this with a rough schedule, and I have the Raiders finishing with just 6 wins. At the end of the day, this team isn't very good yet, but I think if they find the right quarterback, whether that's O'Connell or somebody else, this team has a promising future. The Broncos began their rebuild by drafting Bo Nix at 12th overall, and then paying Russell Wilson $38 million to not play for them. I'm gonna be honest, this team is a dumpster fire. Sean Payton is a massive asshole. Cortland Sutton and Garrett Bowles are the only above average players on this offense, and I'm fully convinced Patrick Surtain is the only living thing on this defense. Outside of PS2, who obviously is a superstar, there really aren't any above average players. I think Bo Nix is a fine prospect, but there's a good chance his style of play won't make it in the NFL. He's a check down king, no way around it. He can throw deep, he just doesn't. His average depth of target last season was just 7 yards, which was 193rd out of qualified D1 quarterbacks. He's efficient at this, but in the NFL, you can't always rely on the check down. Team has a future, but this season is gonna be rough, and I have the Broncos with only 1 win. Yeah, it's low, but they just aren't ready to play with the other teams in the league right now, at least until Bo Nix learns to throw downfield more. As per usual, the Chiefs will take the AFC West once again. The Raiders and Chargers come in 2nd and 3rd, with the Raiders coming in 2nd due to the division records tiebreaker. And then there's the Broncos. Sorry guys, maybe next year. Moving on to the AFC East, we'll start with the Buffalo Bills, who cleaned house and got younger at many positions this offseason. And while I like many of the players that they will be starting, they are unproven. The receiving core and secondary have been almost completely replaced. And while I think the 2025 or 2026 Bills will be better than last year's, I can't say this year's Bills will be better with all of the unproven players. That being said, Josh Allen, despite the turnovers, is really good at football. The defensive line is rock solid, and the offensive line should be good as well. I have the Bills going 10-7 this year, with most of their losses coming to Super Bowl contenders or teams within their division. It's a respectable season, but this year is really about seeing what they have in their young talent. If Aaron Rodgers can last more than 4 snaps, then this season is automatically a win for the Jets. But actually, everyone and their grandma knows that this team is loaded from top to bottom. Last season, they finished 7-10 with Zach Wilson, Trevor Siemian, and Tim Boyle at the helm, and they basically upgraded at every position that they needed to. They brought in Mike Williams to go alongside Garrett Wilson. They brought in 3 new tackles in Tyron Smith, Morgan Moses, and Olu Fashanu, so that won't be a problem anymore. And if their defense couldn't get any better, they replaced Bryce Huff with Hassan Reddick. Though their schedule isn't super easy, I have the Jets going 12-5. This team has above average to superstars at nearly every position, and there isn't any reason that they shouldn't reach this win total, unless the MetLife turf strikes again, or Leonard Floyd does Leonard Floyd things in week 1. But if so, Jordan Travis is still an upgrade over Zach Wilson. With Tua's contract coming up, the Dolphins need to win now before they lose everyone. This team is really good. They have a top 2 receiving duo and a top 10 secondary. Tua isn't a bad quarterback, even if a newborn can throw farther than he can, and the duo of Mostert and A-Chain will keep defenses honest. But that's where the positivity stops. The offensive line is painfully mediocre, and the defensive line is significantly downgraded after the loss of Christian Wilkins, and they might start the season without their 2 top edge rushers in Jalen Phillips and Bradley Chubb. That being said, this roster is too good to not have a bad season, and combine that with a pretty easy schedule, and I have them finishing with 11 wins. As usual, they beat bad teams and lose to good teams. That's why I have them ending on a 4-game losing streak, as all 4 of those teams I believe will finish with at least 11 wins. There's your spoiler, Texans fans. Another average Mike McDaniel season. It's been mostly positive in this division, but that ends here. The Patriots team has more holes than the amount of holes in holes. The receiving core, the offensive line, the receiving core, the receiving core. Holy shit, this receiving core is terrible. I think Kendrick Bourne as your number 1 is just awful. I mean, did the Patriots not learn anything from the Panthers last year? That giving your rookie quarterback absolutely no help is a terrible idea? They don't even have to look outside their own team. Mac Jones literally died because they gave him absolutely nothing, and now his confidence is less than mine when I try to talk to a woman. Drake May's gonna get more destroyed than goddamn Alderaan from Star Wars. Okay. Tangent over. This team's only winning 2 games. The defense is good, but I still think this team's only winning 2 games. I just really hope this team drafts Luther Burden next year, or Territory McMillan, or literally anybody, because right now, a fetus would be more effective than KJ Osborne. To recap the AFC East, the Jets finally win the division and make the playoffs for the first time in 12 years. The Dolphins barely get ahead of the Bills, and I believe that's simply due to the fact that the Dolphins' schedule is a cakewalk compared to the Bills. And then there's the Patriots. We've made it to the final division, the AFC South, and the Houston Texans are up first. I'm just gonna bring up their record now. Yep, you see it properly. I have the Texans finishing with 14 wins. I'm that high on them. I don't think CJ Stroud's rookie year was a fluke, and adding Stephon Diggs to that already loaded receiving core is just going to make things so much better. Joe Mixon is an upgraded running back, and the offensive line isn't bad either. Their defense is really good too. Will Anderson's only going to get better, and they upgraded at edge with Danielle Hunter. Derek Stingley and Jalen Petrie are going to hold down that secondary, and D'Amico Ryans is icing on the cake. I and many others say that defensive-minded head coaches limit the ceiling of a team, but I think that this is an exception. Unlike most, Ryans is not an old-school head coach. He connects with his players, and his more modern 4-2 defense has proven to be very effective. Overall, I'm super high on this team, and I think they will have a fantastic season. The Jaguars just made Trevor Lawrence the highest paid player in history, and now it's time to prove that he can lead this team to the playoffs. This team is solid all around, with a few stars in Josh Allen and Evan Ingram, but overall, this team isn't anything spectacular. They have mostly average to slightly above average players in most positions, and sometimes that just isn't enough. Combine that with a very tough schedule, and I think the Jags only finished with 8 wins, not meeting most people's expectations. I think this team starts 0-4 and simply won't be able to recover. Their lack of star power really holds this team back, but if their young guys, specifically Trayvon Walker and Brian Thomas, have good seasons, then the future is bright. This season for the Titans is all about seeing if Will Levis is the guy. Not much else really matters, which shows when taking a look at this roster. There are really only 2 position groups that are above average, and that's the receiving core and interior defensive line. Everything else just isn't that good. The offensive line's not good, and while they have potential, this season is going to be rough up front. Losing Derrick Henry is also a big problem, literally. So the Titans won't have the running game that they've been used to. The linebacking room and the edge room is also very poor, and the secondary outside of L'Jarius Sneed isn't that good. The team is not not ready to compete yet, and that's why I have them only going 3-14. It's low, but like I said, this team just isn't that good. I think Will Levis has a solid season, but that's really the only positive takeaway from this season. They need to try and get some younger talent with higher upside or proven veterans in a lot of positions before they are ready to compete. Just like the Titans, the Colts' main goal this season is finding out if they have a franchise quarterback. I think Anthony Richardson is going to be great in this league, especially with Shane Steichen at head coach, but he will have his ups and downs. Unlike the Titans, this Colts team actually has above average players at multiple positions. The offensive line is solid, the receiving core is young and talented, and Jonathan Taylor's pretty good at football as well. All three levels of the defense are solid at worst, and while I only have them going 6-11, I think they will be a pain in a lot of team sides, and will take games down to the wire. While 6-11 doesn't look great this season, I do have them finishing strong, going 3-1 in their last 4 games, and the future is very bright in Indy. Looking at the AFC South, the Texans soar past the rest, finishing in first by a mile. The Jags come up second at 8-9, with the Colts not too far behind in 6-11, and the Titans at 3-14 are resting down at the bottom. So here are my final projected AFC standings. I have the Texans and Chiefs being the 2 top teams in the conference. The Texans take the 1 seed though due to the head-to-head tiebreaker as they beat the Chiefs in week 16. The Ravens sit at the 3 seed at 13-4, and the Jets aren't far behind at the 4 seed at 12-5. The Bengals, despite having a better record than the Jets, finished 1 place lower at the 5 seed due to division placement. And the Browns take the 6 seed over the Dolphins. This actually means that the Bills narrowly miss out on the playoffs. In most cases, going 10-7 is a free playoff berth, but in this stacked AFC, it just isn't enough this year. The Steelers also don't come too far from the playoffs, finishing 9-8 and sitting at the 9 seed. The Jags take the 10 seed, and the Raiders, Chargers, and Colts all tie for the 11 seed. The tiebreaker goes to the Raiders, however, due to the division placement tiebreaker, and the Chargers finish at the 12 seed over the Colts due to the common record games tiebreaker. The Titans sit at the 14 seed, the Patriots at the 15 seed, and the Broncos bottoming out the AFC at the 16 seed. On to my playoff predictions. Well, we'll start on the AFC side. The 1 seed Texans get the first round bye, and in the wild card, the 2 seed Chiefs take on the 7 seed Dolphins, 3 seed Ravens face the 6 seed Browns, and the 4 seed Jets take on the 5 seed Bengals. I have the Chiefs, Ravens, and Bengals advancing on to the divisional round, with the Dolphins, Browns, and Jets going home. In the divisional, the 1 seed Texans get the first playoff action, taking on the 5 seed Bengals, and the 2 seed Chiefs once again take on the 3 seed Ravens. Just like last year, I have the Chiefs eliminating the Ravens, and the Texans eliminate the Bengals to move on to the conference championship. In the conference championship, the 1 seed Texans and the 2 seed Chiefs face off in a week 16 rematch. And just like in week 16, the Texans take down the Chiefs and advance to the Super Bowl for the first time in franchise history. Over on the NFC side, the 49ers get the first round bye. And in the wild card, the 2 seeded Eagles take on the 7 seed Packers, the 3 seed Lions take on the 6 seed Cowboys, and the 4 seed Falcons face the 5 seed Rams. In a rematch of the Brazil game from week 1, I actually have the Packers upsetting the Eagles, along with the Lions taking down the Cowboys and the Rams beating the Falcons. This means that in the divisional round, we have 2 playoff rematches from last year. In the 1 seed 49ers versus the 7 seed Packers, and the 3 seeded Lions against the 5 seed Rams. And same as last year, I have the 49ers and Lions coming out on top, creating a rematch in the NFC Championship from last year. However, this year, I believe that the 3 seed Lions upset the 1 seed 49ers and move on to their first Super Bowl in franchise history. In the Super Bowl, we have 2 teams that have never made it before this year, and the Texans from the AFC and the Lions from the NFC. And I believe that the Texans take the Lombardi Trophy this year over the Lions, with Will Anderson winning Super Bowl MVP. I do truly believe that this Texans team is capable of something special, and that they are going to be the team that wins Super Bowl 59. Finally, we have the NFL Honors Awards predictions, and we'll start with everyone's favorite, the most valuable player award. But yes, I do have this award going to a quarterback, and yes, it is CJ Stroud. He was in the MVP discussion as a rookie, and his receiving core only got better, and he has another year of experience under his belt. And I do believe that he's a massive second season, similar to Patrick Mahomes and Lamar Jackson, and he wins the MVP. For my offensive player of the year, I think it's going to go to another second-year player in Bijan Robinson. With Arthur Smith dialing up plays for Des Fitzpatrick out in Pittsburgh, Bijan can actually get his proper usage, and I think it's very likely he goes over 2,000 scrimmage yards, which I think will be enough to win the offensive player of the year. I have another young player winning this year's defensive player of the year award, and that's Aiden Hutchinson. Hutch has been a monster ever since entering the league, and this year I think he's going to break out and put himself in the tier 1 of edge rushers with guys like Myles Garrett and TJ Watt. I think he has upwards of 17 sacks and over 100 pressures and walks away with defensive player of the year. Offensive rookie of the year came down to 2 people for me, Caleb Williams and Marvin Harrison, but I decided to go with Marv. He is a true blue chip prospect who can win in all 3 levels of the field. He will be Kyler's go-to guy, and while I don't have the Cardinals finishing with a high record, I believe Marv will have an outstanding first season and win offensive rookie of the year. Defensive Rookie of the Year was a bit trickier, but I ultimately went with Dallas Turner. I think he won't play as many snaps as some of the other rookies due to the Vikings' crowded edge room, but when he gets on the field, I think he's going to be super effective. Brian Flores is the perfect guy to mold Turner into a phenomenal pass rusher, and I also think Flores will put Dallas Turner in many one-on-one situations or simply give him a free shot at the QB. I think Turner puts up monster numbers as a rookie and takes home Defensive Rookie of the Year. Comeback Player of the Year is pretty obvious for me. I think it will be Aaron Rodgers. Simply coming back from a torn Achilles and leading the Jets to a division title and playoff berth should be enough to win it. I also think Rodgers will have a very good season himself as well, and all of this will hand him Comeback Player of the Year. I also feel very strongly about my Coach of the Year prediction, and that's D'Amico Ryans. Leading the Texans to a 14-win season, and his impact on that defense and his players in general lead me to believe that he will win Coach of the Year. But that's it. Those are my predictions for the entire 2024-2025 NFL season. If you enjoyed this video, then please drop a like and subscribe if you're new. See ya!